Hello and welcome to the Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Rest Bowl Stretch and Flex Program for Injury Prevention webinar. I'm Darrell Oliver, a loss prevention representative assigned to the Houston area, and with me today is Danny Valadez. Danny is a loss prevention representative assigned to the Panhandle area of the state, and also Danny has been a safety manager for the New Braunfels utility, and the program that we're actually talking about today, you have implemented or been part of implementation within that former entity that you work for. So we would like to welcome you. I'm going to be talking from the personal training background and perspective about stretching. Danny is going to be talking about the real life scenario of how it has worked out in a municipal entity in the field for the employees. So let's begin by talking about reasons why you should do stretch and flex and have that incorporated into your daily work activities and to your life in general. Number one is unrestricted daily activity. If you lose flexibility in your life because of sedentary activity, or just the very fact that your job may be sedentary in some cases, you will get into a point to where you won't be able to have good mobility, and daily tasks that you do in your personal life, work tasks that you do, will end up actually being hard for you to do. We want you to have that unrestricted ability to perform your work tasks, to perform your daily tasks, going to the grocery store, cleaning house, doing those types of activities, and to pursue leisure time activities, whether that's playing golf or whatever your leisure time choice activity is. The second reason that we're looking at is efficient movement. If you lose flexibility, you lose efficient movement. That's where we get into awkward body positions and awkward body posture because of that lack of flexibility that does occur. That's where we start to see strains, sprains, and injuries show up because there is no efficiency or you do not have fluid movement in job tasks that you're trying to do.
That's right, Darrell. We did, in preparing for this webinar, we discussed several aspects of retaining that flexibility in our body. You tend to work harder when you do have that limited mobility and limited flexibility, which opens yourself to injury as well as putting strain on your coworkers because, in essence, they have to pick up that slack that you may be able to provide to help them.
Absolutely. And an example of that efficiency of movement would be having to lift something. And if you do not have good flexibility and it causes you to keep your legs straight and it causes you to bend over and to try and pick an object up in an awkward movement, then that's going to essentially put a 10-to-1 weight ratio on a very small portion of your lower spine. And we see a lot of back injuries that occur because of that.
Absolutely.
So another effect would be that it helps reduce the effect of aging. As we age, which Danny and me can both attest to, as we age in life, if we're not training with stretch and flex activities, we lose a certain amount of that flexibility just as a byproduct of aging goes. But training in flexibility, keeping good flexibility, or realizing you've lost some of it and rebuilding flexibility helps delay that aging effect, and we can live well into our advanced age working career and our retirement years still in a good, flexible body position right. to be able to do our activities that we want to do. So that becomes a very important one. Enhanced performance. Many jobs that we do, they actually require skill in performing the task. Leisure time, would be the same. So I'll throw out a scenario. I know that Danny is a golfer, and
So-called golf.
I don't know how much skill, but it does require skill to get out and drive the golf ball, to chip the golf ball, to do the different things you have to do on the golf course. Well, the same thing in work. If you are going to swing a sledgehammer at work, that requires a great amount of skill to be able to successfully swing the sledgehammer and hit a stake that you're aiming for. So having good flexibility actually allows you to have better performance from a skill-based perspective as well.
That's correct, Daryl. And part of our stretch and flex program at the utility had to do with our employees being what we refer to as industrial athletes, climbing poles, getting on the back of the trucks, lifting, stretching, just physical activity all day long required them to basically be athletes on the job. So it was incumbent on them to stay in good physical shape. This is part of it, keeping your muscles limber, being able to stretch, flex, lift. All these things work hand in hand in preventing injuries and accidents.
The fifth reason is going to be that it offsets sedentary lifestyle. Let me explain that a little further. We're not talking about weight management. We're not talking about cardiovascular fitness in regards to sedentary lifestyle. Specifically in the area of flexibility, if you spend a lot of time of your workday in a sedentary position, it could be data entry at a municipality. It could be data entry working for an appraisal district. You could be driving cars, pickups, large pieces of equipment where you spend most of your day sitting in a seat or chair. You're going to end up losing flexibility. You're going to end up where you have that forward posture over the years that begins to form, and muscle imbalance will form, and you will feel the effects of that sedentary lifestyle over the course of your working career. So actually, incorporating a stretch and flex program will allow you to be able to offset the effects of a sedentary job if in fact you do have a sedentary job. And Danny made a very good point earlier today that sometimes employees do have sedentary jobs, but then their jobs require them to go into very high physical demand parts of their jobs that they have to do. So 5 very valid reasons why you need to do stretch and flex activities, and it benefits you, it benefits co-workers, and it benefits the entity that you work for. So let's talk about the actual components of a stretch and flex program. So frequency, we're going to say daily is what you want to shoot for. And you're in that frequency, don't think of it as I've done my stretch and flex for the day, so I'm done. Think also if you're going to have to do a non-routine task or a very physically demanding task, to go ahead and stop and do some stretch and flex movements to limber up your body to take on that added physical burden that is fixing to take place with the job task that you're fixing to perform. So Danny, when at the public utility, when y'all did your program, kind of how did that play out?
Well, what we did, we incorporated the stretch and flex program along with what we called a tailboard discussion. Every task, every job required the crew to have a tailboard discussion, discuss the jobs, the hazards, basically how the job is going to go. And during that time, the crew members would basically stand in a circle and incorporate the stretch flex program during the tailboard. So it didn't interfere with the job. It was part of the pre-job planning, if you will, and basically signed off on it, notified the supervisor that he participated, and we went on with our job after that.
So As a loss prevention representative, I hear several aspects of what you just said. Number one, the topic at hand is that you build that flexibility, you build that warm up before you actually begin those physical activities. But the second part of that is that it's always a good idea to discuss the way that a job is going to be done, the safety aspects of the job prior to the work activity actually taking place. Right. So you're kind of combining these concepts of getting that orientation to the task at hand out of way from a safety perspective, and also physically preparing your body to be able to take on the burden, the physical burden that is going to happen to the body.
And it didn't cut into the productivity. It was done during the time which you were going to be there anyway. So it was basically two birds with one stone.
So on that point, I will add, if someone is not warmed up, if someone is not flexible and they are injured, not only do they have a nagging strain or sprain injury that they have to deal with potentially from a work activity, but if they are injured, that puts them off the job, and then coworkers might potentially have to put in extra hours to make up for that. It has a cascading effect, and not only affecting the employee, but affecting the entity in question as well. So don't always think in terms of we have to hurry up and get this done. Think about the safety aspect of it, and think about how long it takes you to do a task if someone does get injured in the process.
That's right.
Okay, intensity of the movement. So at no time when you're doing a stretch and flex movement should you feel or experience pain. You might feel mild discomfort just as your muscle warms up or as your muscle stretches, but at no time should it be pain that you feel, should it be a grating that you almost sense or feel. Use your common sense, use your judgment. This is not a competition where Danny and me are going to see who can outstretch each other. This is relative to each individual employee, and it's really warming yourself up. It's maintaining your flexibility, and in some cases, it's actually increasing that flexibility where there may be a need to do that.
And you and I discussed this earlier. It's a very personal exercise. It's basically you and your body. No one else can tell you how you feel. So it's up to you to determine how far is far enough. It's just one of those things that you have to, in yourself, determine what's good enough to get that muscle stretched and ready to go.
Good point. So time of these, a couple of different ways of looking at time. One is going to be from the overall aspect of time. You should really be putting in a minimum of 10 minutes. We have selected 12 dynamic stretch and flex movements that will very easily fit into that 10-minute time period. But the other one would be that it's not a race to see how fast you can finish these. They are controlled and they are done in a slow manner, and we're going to continually highlight that. We're going to continually talk about that. And when Danny actually goes through the stretches, that'll be brought up time and time again, because this is not an aerobic activity we're doing. It is a stretching activity that we're doing. And so it always has to be done in a controlled manner. And we always want to begin with small movements, and then as we go through the activity, increase the larger movements.
That's right. Even in practicing these, you tend to get caught up and basically doing them a little faster than necessary. So it's a good practice to keep an eye on your coworkers and just make sure that this is a stretching exercise. It's not, and I keep calling it an exercise. It's actually just a stretch and flex. What would be a good word for it, Daryl? It's
activity or movement that we're doing.
There you go.
Okay, so two aspects of stretching. One is dynamic stretching, which is what the wrist bowl has chosen to base their program on. So with dynamic stretching, just like it sounds, it's dynamic. you're actually moving and in motion. The muscles and the joints are in motion while you're doing your stretch and flex activity. The good thing about that is you start with small movements, you gradually progress to larger movements. So there is an inherent warm up in effect for each body part that's taking place while you're moving from slow movements to larger movements, or I should say small movements to larger movements. Um, Dynamic stretching should take each activity or exercise should take 30 seconds to 1 minute, and it should be 5 to 12 repetitions if you want to look at it in terms of repetitions. So if you're doing 5 repetitions, you're looking at roughly 30 seconds to complete it. And if you're doing 12 repetitions, roughly 60 seconds to complete that activity. So again, that's showing you the slowness of what's taking place here, because the goal, again, is controlled movement, and the goal is actual stretching. It's not cardiovascular in nature, it's stretching in nature. And so each time once we start off with a small movement, as we progress in that 30 to 60 seconds, 5 to 12 reps, we want to try and stretch the muscle more and more as we do the activity and the movement.
And I like the way you described it to me earlier. You're basically waking that muscle up, preparing it to go to work, getting the blood flowing through it. It's not getting it and putting it to work right away. It's basically preparing it to go to work.
Absolutely. So, and it would be a good idea in doing static stretching that although many, like American College of Sports Medicine, um, the program that we have looked at has basically said to consider doing warm up before you do dynamic stretching. That could consist of simply walking, just getting the blood flowing, like you said, muscles waking up to warm up. Um, but in a real sense, as you move from small movements to large movements, in effect, you are warming up, going from those gradual small movements to the large movements with each one of these, as you'll see when we do each activity. So another aspect of stretching becomes static stretching. We will not be doing static stretching in our program. You may want to do static stretching and incorporate that in your life. That takes more time to do. You're looking at doing 4 repetitions of a static stretch and 15 to 60 seconds. The goal becoming to hold the stretch for longer and create a longer stretch of a muscle. And just like it sounds, it becomes a static activity you do. Many times in a static stretching program, you may use aids to help you, towels or pieces of webbing, where you're actually creating a longer stretch in the muscle. The thing about static stretching is it requires significantly more warm-up time before you do a static stretch, because you do not want to end up tearing or hurting yourself, tearing a muscle in the process of doing it. So we will focus on the dynamic stretching aspect of activity as we progress through our program. So let's talk about stretch and flex safety. So Danny and me discussed earlier, a good analogy would be if you have a rubber band that you keep in an ice box and you hold a rubber band in your hand for a good length of time, and then you try and stretch each one of those rubber bands, you're going to feel a big difference in the elasticity of the rubber bands. And in fact, if the rubber band is cold enough on the one hand, it might actually break, snap, or tear. Muscles are going to basically act the same way. Anytime that you are doing an activity that creates an elongation of your muscle or stretch in a job activity or leisure activity, you're exposing yourself to potential injury. And the colder that muscle is, the more potential injury that you're at risk of. So it is important to warm up before you do activities and again, do these dynamic stretches in a controlled, slow manner, small movements, and make the movements larger.
And this is something that, and this could even go back a few slides, but we discussed professional athletes when they're going out to play football or play baseball or any intense activity. They don't go from the clubhouse out onto the field and start playing right away. They go out, they start slowly with stretching, they start warming up, and they work themselves into the actual playing physical aspect of their game. It's very important. It's very similar to what we're talking about here.
And if the people watching were honest, I'm sure many of you see very physical work that is done in your workplace, but no one is warming up or stretching like you see professional athletes do. But many tasks that you do throughout the day are just as physical as activities that athletes do. Okay, a second safety consideration is going to be range of motion. So our goal is always to maintain or build flexibility within normal range of motion of a joint and a muscle. We don't care personally about exceeding, becoming a contortionist and exceeding that range of motion. All we're concerned about is having good flexibility for the range of motion of a life activity you do, a sport activity you do, or a job-related activity you do, that you have that good flexibility and that you are safe and free from injury when you do it. At no time should it cause pain. It should be something that you can do pain-free, maybe mild discomfort depending on how far you're reaching or bending, but at no time should the activity ever cause pain. You need to keep it within that range of motion of the normal range of motion of a muscle or the joint.
And eventually, hopefully, your range of motion will be that, but will be more intense or longer, where hopefully the stretching will pay off in the long run, pay dividends.
Yes. Okay, use controlled movement. You're going to hear me say it over and over again, but I cannot state this enough. This is not an activity that you try and get kinetic energy working with you and for you. And if we're doing a leg rotation, the goal is not to start swinging your leg side to side or front to back as fast as you can do it. It has to be carefully thought out, controlled movements you're doing, that each repetition, if you want to look at it in terms of repetition, takes you 10 seconds to do. It's in a controlled manner, and you start with a small movement and you go to a big movement. And each time, as you are working through your 5 to 12 rep range, each time you do increase the movement, you try and stretch further and further, like Danny said earlier, within comfort, within whatever you feel is comfortable for you to accomplish and achieve safely within that dynamic stretch and flex movement. And then we want to discuss the reality that there are stretches that you should avoid. So don't go get on the internet and just look at any stretching information that's out there. Look at reputable, safe sources when you're looking for your stretching information. But what was considered safe in the past many times, the hurdler stretch would be an example. How many times growing up playing football or basketball or baseball or track, whatever the activity was, that was the go-to, the hurdler stretch.
And the touch your toes stretch, the neck roll, these were all tried and true at the time, but over time it's been determined that there's better ways to warm up your body.
Correct. American College of Sports Medicine has determined many of these stretches are unsafe. So hurdler stretch, I'm not going to assume the hurdler stretch position, but you all know what that looks like. Laying on the ground, your leg straight out in front of you, another leg bent, reaching for your toe, the standing with your legs straight and bending straight over and touching your toes. Another one that you probably have seen, maybe even in back injury prevention training, would be either over rounding or hyper flexing your back. So anytime someone's asking you to over round, and it's going to be more pronounced than what I just did, but that reaching forward movement, that's not a safe stretch to consider, nor is the stretch where you put your hands behind you and you reach back as far as you can possibly reach by flexing your back, either way, forward or backwards. Those are considered unsafe stretches.
Especially on a cold body that has had no warm up. And we're probably all guilty of getting up in the morning and doing the back roll when we get up in the morning. But yeah, that's probably not the best thing to do.
So what we're going to do now is I'm going to step out of the picture, and Danny is going to actually go through a stretch and flex program. We have 12 activities we're going to do, and we're going to just do 5, maybe 6 repetitions of it. And we want to kind of show you the movement pattern. I'll be off camera explaining the movement pattern, probably interjecting information. But as we do these stretch and flex activities, maybe think about aspects of your job that you do and how these different stretch and flex exercises maybe simulate what you do in a job, or they involve muscle groups that you use in a job. So if you want to grab your balancing prop, I'm going to move the table and let's get going on this.
And you don't have to take one of these out to each job site. This is just something I'm using here in studio, so I don't flop over.
So the very first one that we're looking at is arm circles. So stand with your feet shoulder width apart.
And something I'd like to interject at this time is make sure you don't poke your fellow worker in the eye or slap them across the head when you're doing this. Make sure you've got clearance.
So, and again, you're seeing this in a studio. Danny made a really excellent point earlier. As it played out in his role as a safety manager, you may be doing this standing next to a backhoe. You may be doing this in a public works facility. You may be doing this in a dispatch area. Many different work environments that you'll have to kind of look how to incorporate this. But this is actually something we do in live time in the work environment prior to beginning our work activities. Correct. So with the arm circles, again, start with small circles and maybe take 10 seconds to do that small circle.
And this is something you really probably need to concentrate on going slow, because your tendency is to want to go faster than you need to, but slow circles.
And each time you make a circle, keep a count of the reps in your head. Make the circles bigger each time you do the circle. And consciously try and limber the parts of the body. In this case, we're looking at the arms and the shoulders. So how does that feel in actuality?
You know, something to remember, too, is to engage the muscles that you're really focusing on. I can feel it in my arms, obviously, because I've been holding them up for a little bit. I feel them on the sides of my body here. It's basically waking up my body. We're doing this pretty early in the morning, so this is probably one of the most physical things I've done so far, believe it or not. But yeah, just bigger circles.
So by the time that Danny would get to his 12th rep, he would be doing very large circles in the rotation, again, normal range of motion. But he's limbering up the joints and the muscles in his arms and shoulders. Okay, the next one that we're going to take a look at, again, dealing with arms and shoulders, is the shoulder shrug. So you would stand with your feet shoulder width apart, and literally you're going to try and raise your shoulders to your ear, and you would do it slowly, and then you would let your shoulders down, and each time that you raise your shoulders to your ear, you're trying to relax your shoulders and arms and maybe your trap muscles, and you're trying each time to shrug higher and higher. Again, not straining, not overdoing it, but just keeping it in the normal range of motion.
And again, you feel this in your shoulders and in your back, in your neck. I do this quite often throughout the day when I get asked a question. So,
okay. The third movement we're going to look at is the pendulum leg swing, front and back. So in Danny's case, in the studio, he's grabbing a chair. What might you be holding onto in the field?
side of a truck, backhoe tire, fence post, just something that's sturdy that you might help to balance yourself. Further on down the line, you might not need anything. You might be able to do this without any assistance. But starting off, we encourage you to just make sure you don't topple over, especially outdoors when you might have uneven ground.
So you're going to take one of your legs and swing it forwards, and then swing it backwards.
Again, this is something that you can feel your muscles in your leg and engage. And as you do them further and further, you'll feel them get warm a little bit. They shouldn't burn. They shouldn't hurt.
Yes.
But
so each time that Danny swings his leg, his goal is to lift it higher in the front and lift it further in the back while he's keeping his back straight. And again, only go to your physical limitation within range of motion. But by the time you hit your 12th rep, your muscles should be warmed up and you should feel that stretch that's taking place. Probably in this one, you're going to feel the stretch in the back of
the hamstring, yes.
Absolutely. That's specifically what that one's
and then transition to the other leg and do the same thing.
Correct. Okay, so that one specifically was looking at the hips and buttocks. So we're going to stay in this category, hips and buttocks, and we're going to go to the pendulum leg swing side to side. So again, stabilize yourself to begin with. Like Danny said, an excellent point. The goal would be that you get to where you can do this without stabilization. And you're literally going to swing your leg across your body, and then you're going to swing it out away from your body. This one becomes challenging from a balance perspective.
Yes. And this one you can feel again in your thigh, in your hip, your behind. Again, going slow is the main thing, engaging those muscles that you're working out, you're stretching out.
Yep, you're stretching muscles. You're not doing aerobic activity.
And you can actually even feel it in your core because your balance is in play here.
So Danny would do this 5 to 12 times, and then he would switch legs. You always want to do balance on activities where it requires it. All right, the next one we're going to take a look at is internal hip rotation. Again, hips and buttocks. So what Danny will do is he will be standing either balanced or supporting himself on something, and he is literally going to raise his leg up to the outside and slap his heel with his hand.
Again, you can feel this in your hip, getting your hips to warm up. Obviously, you want to go slow at first. And as you can tell, I'm not trying to touch my heel right immediately on my first move. You work your way there.
So he would do this exercise 5 to 12 times to begin with. When you're first starting a program, you might look at 5 times, then progress and work your way up to the 12 times. The goal, again, would be close to a minute on each one of these 12. That puts you at your 10 minutes of stretch and flex activity. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is going to be external hip rotation. So now he's going to change, and he is going to bring his foot in, and the same thing, he's going to try and touch his heel when he brings his foot in and up. Are you feeling different muscles at play?
Right here, the thigh muscle. So yeah, obviously my flexibility is not what it used to be, but yeah, you always want to start off slow. You don't want to extend yourself to where you're going to hurt yourself. So,
And I just want to interject. You'll notice that Danny is in work clothes because this is not something that you're going to be in PT gear doing, but because this is intended to do on the job.
yes.
First thing in the morning, like Danny said, toolbox talk. We actually want this to be part of your work environment and part of what you're doing. Okay, we will move to the next one. We're still in the hips and buttocks, and it's going to be the side shuffle. So literally, you will step out to the side, say with your left foot, small step, and then bring your feet together. Knees slightly bent. Another side step, knees slightly bent, bring your feet together. And each time, try and step wider. We're going to run out of studio room here, but each time, try and step wider.
Again, keeping your muscles engaged because it brings the blood going, and you can feel your actual muscles under a little bit of strain. They're not painful by any means, but you can feel them working.
Okay, the next one is now going to move to your glutes. This one is called the butt kick. What you're going to do literally is lift your heel up towards your buttock, small to begin with. Each time you lift your heel up, you're going to try and lift the heel up higher to the point where maybe you actually are able to make contact with your buttocks area. Again, it's controlled movements, starts off slow, but each time you try and stretch that muscle further and engage it and become more and more limber when you do
Right. What you don't want to do is sit there and try to
Correct.
flick it. You go slow and let that muscle do
Correct.
some work.
Okay, so that was for our quadriceps. For our hamstrings, we're going to do the high knee lifts. So again, you start off with a small movement, slow and controlled. Each time that Danny lifts his leg, he wants to try and lift it higher and stretch it further.
And this is something you do many times a day, stepping into a truck, stepping into a backhoe, over any type of equipment or a curb. You do this continuously. So obviously something you want to get warmed up to do to prepare yourself for.
So he would do one leg, 5 to 12 repetitions, and then switch and do the other leg, 5 to 12 repetitions. All right, now we're going to move to the ankles. So for this activity, Danny will sit in a chair. You can sit on a toolbox, on an ice chest, whatever you have to sit on in your particular job site. And bring your feet together, Danny, and begin by pulling your toes towards you and pushing your toes away from you. Small, controlled to begin with. Each time you pull your toes and push your toes, try and make it more pronounced and more of a stretch.
And this, again, you can feel in your hams or in your
calf muscles.
In your calf muscles, in your ankles. And again, we use those muscles all day long.
It's really important to have your ankle stabilizing muscles flexible and to have them warmed up and engaged because that is a large source of balance throughout the day, especially if you're working on a job site with terrain that is not perfectly flat and carpeted like in the studio. You may have very rough terrain. Now, what he will do next after he does his 5 to 12 repetitions is he'll spread his feet wide, and then he will start doing circles in and out, clockwise and counterclockwise with his feet, again, slow and controlled. And then he will make the circles bigger and the stretches larger as he does them.
This is not painful. This takes 10 minutes. Should be pretty easy for anybody to do before they start their projects.
Okay, so in just this short amount of time, we have accomplished dynamic stretching all of the major groups of the body. So now Danny is going to do some full body stretches. We have two of them that we've included. The first one is going to be the soldier walk. With this one, you're going to lift one leg and you're going to try and touch the toe with the opposite arm. This is going to be more, there you go.
And again, you don't want to try to touch it on the first try unless you're already very limber, but I'm not, so you work into it, you ease into it.
Small, controlled movements to begin with, larger controlled movements as you progress, each time trying to stretch further. So Danny would do 5 to 12 repetitions. With one leg and arm, he would switch and do 5 to 12 on the other. The last stretch and flex activity we have is called the wood chop. So put your hands together, lift them over one shoulder, and then wood chop down. Slowly lift again and slowly wood chop down. And each time try and make the stretch a little more pronounced.
And this one you can feel in your entire core as you get blood flowing through there. The muscles in the side of your body, your legs, they're basically all working on this one.
So once you would do this 5 to 12 times on one side of your body, you would switch and do 5 to 12 chops on the other side of your body. Okay, thank you, Danny. So wrapping up with our discussion and presentation today, there are a lot of benefits to doing stretch and flex program. We want to keep the time frame in 10 minutes, as you are probably tired of hearing me say. You want them to be controlled movements, and you want to begin always with small movements and progress to larger movements, keeping that control. The 12 exercises or activities that we have listed, it would be just under 1 minute per activity if you went to the full 12 reps in order to accomplish that 10 minutes. But you do want to practice this every day, and keep in mind you would want to do these activities if you're going to engage in a very physically demanding activity, especially one that you're not used to doing, but it comes up and you have to do. The little bit of time that you spend doing that can save a lot of time in the back end of an injury or strain, not only for yourself, but for your co-workers who might have to step up, and for the entity who might have to deal with delays of whatever the project or work activity is.
For somebody who thinks that what we just went through wouldn't be a benefit, I encourage you to try it for a week or two. Just what I did just now, and it wasn't the full reps that we were talking about, I feel it. I feel it in my legs, and I can promise you it would be of some benefit to you.
Absolutely. So components of why we want to do stretch and flex, real quickly again, is we want to have unrestricted daily activity. Again, when we lose that flexibility, it does restrict what we do during the day and how we do it. We want to have that freedom to have movement in our work activities, movement in our leisure time activities, and just our daily tasks. Going to the grocery store, bagging groceries, and putting them in your trunk.
Tying your shoelaces.
Yes.
I mean, there's unlimited tasks that we do every day that would help.
Secondly, we want to have efficient movement. Again, loss of flexibility always leads to inefficient movement, which leads to awkward movement when you're doing a task. Awkward movement is generally going to lead to you injuring, straining, spraining something, and we don't want that. We want to be able to do our physical task with efficiency and with the proper body mechanics, and flexibility will help you do that. Third reason is the reduced effect of aging. As we said when we began this, you are going to lose flexibility as you age, but you can greatly reduce that effect on your body as you age by practicing stretch and flex activities daily throughout your life. You can go into retirement years and advanced age with good body posture and the ability to do our unrestricted daily movement.
And we probably all know people that are on both ends of that spectrum that have taken care and have exercised and are able to do everything that they could do when they were younger, and those that can't.
Yes. Number 4, enhanced performance. Many job tasks that we do during the day, they actually, as Danny called workers athletes, they do require skill levels to do them. So we want to have flexibility because good flexibility is always going to help efficient movement, which is always going to help you perform something in a skillful manner. So we do want that enhanced performance. Again, work and leisure time pursuits that we do. Number 5, it offsets sedentary lifestyle, not from a calorie standpoint, weight gain standpoint, not from a cardiovascular standpoint, but from a flexibility standpoint. If we do find ourselves in basically sedentary jobs, performing stretch and flex throughout the day helps us keep in a flexible, movable, state for our bodies where actually we're not affected by that sedentary lifestyle, where we get that forward posture, that muscle imbalance that occurs because most of what we do, typing, driving, tying shoes, is always in that forward posture. And the last thing that I want to mention, closing this up, and Danny alluded to it earlier when he was doing the exercise, one of the big benefits, we could do a whole program on balance, but one of the big benefits of doing stretching activities, especially if we're doing dynamic stretching where you're not laying on a floor, is that you're building balance while you're actually doing your dynamic stretch. Danny started off doing activities holding on to a chair. You may be holding on to a backhoe tire, to a pickup bed, fence post, whatever you have that you're doing this in the field with. But if you can get to a point to where you will build balance and you will be able to do many of these, if not all of these, without the assistance of something to hold on to. And that's an added benefit and bonus, is having that balance to prevent slip and fall injuries, because balance is one of those things that we do lose as we age if we don't train on it specifically. So we do wish you the best of luck in your stretch and flex program. We encourage you to begin incorporating stretch and flex into your work environment and into your lifestyle. And you can watch this video or this webinar as many times as you need to either do group stretching until everyone learns the exercises and gets it down, or maybe in new employee orientations, bringing someone into the crew or into the job site. We do wish you the best, and thank you for watching the webinar.